So how does this escalation of the trade war that we've been covering play in the American heartland? We have the former governor of Wisconsin joining the conversation right now, the Republican Scott Walker. Welcome, Governor Walker. Thoughts on what we heard today? Then maybe we'll talk about last night. Liberation Day. Was it all that you hoped for?
Well, I'm all for free trade. I've been a longtime advocate for that. In fact, I remember talking to President Trump during his first term when he went up to Canada for the G7. And remember during that time, he actually offered all the other nations that he'd get rid of all of our tariffs and all of our restrictions if they did the same. And of course, they looked around, didn't know what to say. I think long term, this is a guy who's been a global businessman. He wants to have free trade, but he also wants to have it on a level playing field, or at least close to that. And I hope that some of these countries react the way that we just saw Israel act, getting rid of their tariffs, or, for example, Colombia earlier this year when he proposed a tariff there and they backed away. Some will take longer than others, but I hope for the most part we'll get back to not only more free trade, but a fair trade process for Wisconsin and people all across the country.
What does the interim look like? And will people, I was talking to Geraldo about this earlier, will people essentially put up with it, you know?
Well, we've seen the last few weeks lower prices when it comes to eggs and other food products. So hopefully that won't drive things up in the short term too much. It all depends. I mean, we were told a couple months ago, at the beginning of the Trump presidency, we were going to have to pay more for Colombian coffee. We didn't get to that point because they backed down.
Right.
It depends. It depends how other nations react to this. And I think the key right now is pushing for that fairness, using this as a tool. Remember, Ronald Reagan, one of my heroes, talked about free trade and against tariffs, but he also used them occasionally, two specific instances against Japan when it came to electronics and when it came to motorcycles, because they were abusing their trade agreements. If it works out that way, we'll actually prepare pretty well. It's not a long-term solution, though.
You know, one of the things that's interesting, you mentioned how countries might react. I think it's also interesting how companies might react to all of this. For example, last time we had a kind of a trade back and forth or trade war with China, a lot of companies moved, Chinese companies, to Mexico to try to get around it. And now, well, maybe that's backfiring on them. I wonder this time if they'll make moves as aggressively. What the president wants them to do is move everything back here to the United States. He actually talked about that in his announcement today. Let me play that clip, and we'll talk about the concept after it. Here's the president. We don't have that. Well, anyway, the point, he was saying Apple's already said we're $500 billion coming in, and all these other companies are saying we're going to build here with our plants. And as I said earlier, sometimes, I mean, that sounds great, and they've made those announcements. It takes a while, right? And if the president's going to your point, do we have the clip now? All right, so I do want to play it the way he phrased it. Here's the president.
Apple is going to spend $500 billion. They never spent money like that here. They're going to build their plants here. SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle, great companies, are investing $500 billion almost immediately. NVIDIA, a hot company, is investing hundreds of billions of dollars. They just announced TSMC is investing $200 billion.
So I was going to ask you, Governor Walker, is that to your earlier point, the president sometimes backs off on some announcements, right? So if you're a company, you want the certainty so you can make plans for investments like that. How do you think it plays out?
Well, again, I think if he's backing away from anything, it'll be because it's actually working, not because he doesn't want to do it. So what we saw in the case of Colombia, in a very small version of what we're talking about here, the backing off was because they did what he asked them to do. And so if you saw other nations reduce, again, it's why I think Israel, one of our greatest allies in the world, was smart to say, hey, no tariffs. We're getting rid of all of them. We want to be as best a trade partner as we can be. If we saw moves in that direction, that would be great. It's not just for the president, for America, but for American workers. I come from the industrial Midwest. You know, we saw back 20, 30 plus years ago, jobs go out of our state, go out of our region to places like Mexico and around the world. So I think we'd love to see some of those jobs coming back and put people in our communities and our state back to work.
Speaking of your state, I'd planned to have a longer conversation about this, but now we got into trade. Last night, you know, the state Supreme Court seat goes to the liberal. Well, the Democrats come out and saying this is a big message being sent to the president, possibly to Elon Musk. What was the message, if any, that was received or delivered last night?
Well, the message is big money wins. The winning candidate, Susan Crawford, got about 77% of her money from out of state. Big funders like billionaire Reid Hoffman, J.D. Pritzker, George Soros. Yeah, Musk was involved, but nowhere near what you looked at the collective amount elsewhere. And so big money from out of state combined with reaction. We're the ultimate swing state. You know, Wisconsin, in the last 35 years, the party in power in the White House has lost the governorship in all but one elections during the last 35 years. So we swing back and forth, and that's what you saw here again. There's a conservative in the White House, a liberal one in this big race. It'll probably swing back again in the future.
Thanks so much for watching. Just go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.